Rachel Boucher, Head of Content at Event Marketer, here with Jon Wolff, Senior Global Events Manager for Lenovo's Solutions and Services Group. Jon has served as a workshop leader at our Experiential Marketing Summit. He heads up global event and trade show strategy at Lenovo and is passionate about data-driven decision-making. We love that. We invited Jon here to dig into what's on his mind now and what's ahead as a corporate trade show event marketer. And Jon, I think I've only scratched the surface of what you do. Tell us about what you oversee at Lenovo and just a couple of your marquee events and experiences in the portfolio.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Rachel. Um, Really, when it comes down to what I do at Lenovo, so I represent the Solutions and Services Group. Um, you know Lenovo for the hardware, for the infrastructure, not necessarily for the services that go with all of those devices or the infrastructure. And so what I have to do, I jokingly say this, is create experiences from air. And what that means is as we're showing up at events, I don't have the luxury of having the latest PC or the sleek devices that Lenovo is known for. And so we have to get creative. And as we're doing our flagship events or proprietary events or road shows, how do we create experiences or demos from those services that really tell the story of what Lenovo is doing? And I can't do it alone. I partner and have a team of three wonderful team members that really help us develop the strategy, develop the go-to-market when we're working with sales, really that end-to-end story. What are the demos? What are the experiences that we want our customers to come away with? And ultimately, as we're doing these events, what the C-suite cares about and what executives are interested in is how are we sharing results? How are we developing a strategy that can develop opportunities or pipeline?
Turning to your trade show strategy for 2025, what's the approach? Anything new that you're trying?
What we are doing is really getting it right and having that blend when it comes to the strategy focuses around road shows, focusing around hyper-targeted events, where are we meeting the customer where they're at? Industry events, trade shows, events have always kind of brought people to that location. We're seeing less of that happen and more people are able to find that material online. They're going to events for education and awareness, yes. So with that churn, with that deviation from going to the typical event, how can we be in front of that? So really that's those hyper-targeted events, meet the customer where they're at, and thought leadership, right? How can we position what we're doing in an unconventional way when it comes to executive boardrooms? So it's kind of a combination of proprietary events from our big corporate events to industry events, more of that B2B with our business group, and then our typical industry events, because we can't not do the industry event that we've been doing. Competition is there. We've done it, every year. But what we're trying to do is really this year new is incorporating in-booth podcasts. It kind of sounds silly and it's like, well, everyone's doing that. Well, not necessarily, right? It's a low-hanging fruit. We've been able to use in-booth podcasts or out-of-booth, whatever you want to do, but as a staple to our strategy and program. And really what that boils down to is we get a team together, have conversations that we've outlined with our stakeholders, having that alignment with product and offering to figure out what those questions are, and then going to the booth, going to the event, and really having that moment where it's less about a sales pitch. It's more about let's have a conversation. Here's questions that we're developing. And then the secret in the sausage is once we're done with that, we're going to package it up. And then within 24 hours, we're cascading it to that attendee that joined us with a message that here's your curated podcast if you want to use on social media. Here is the copy to accompany it. We'd love to continue the conversation. So it's two-part, having that thank you gift back to the attendee, and then it's a foot in the door with our sales to say, hey, here is that customer that joined us. Continue the conversation and giving them visibility to that customer so it's a foot in the door.
What are the hallmarks of a Lenovo experience?
So ultimately, it's the brand, right? What's the distinct colors? What's the palette? What's the design language? Beyond that, it's about creating that signature demo or experience that sparks that conversation. Whether it's what we did in Hanover, Germany, with a sneaker artist, to the podcast, and with that sneaker artist, one of the things we did, and you're probably thinking, well, what the heck? Like a sneaker artist? This was a new event for us. So not every event will it always be this grandiosa. But for those newer events, what can we do to differentiate ourselves from other exhibitors? And so what we did here was a manufacturing event. The theme was Step into Innovation with Lenovo. And so we had a sneaker artist based out of Madrid. He actually did sneakers for Ed Sheeran recently. So it's kind of cool to see him gaining that popularity. But we had him create 14 unique sneakers for us to then have for in-booth giveaways. So we brought him into the event. He had four shoes that he created, 12 shoes that he created ahead of the event, and then one shoe per day that he was developing live in person. So we had that opportunity for people to stop by the booth and say, well, what is he doing? Start that conversation, get them into the booth, and then it tied to our overall theme. His name is Melon Kicks. It's a cool giveaway. One thing I can't stand is cheap swag, and it's like, how do we create intentional swag so that it's heartfelt, it's memorable, it's something that you can't just get. You have to have that conversation with us, and it's an intentional gift or giveaway.
Your team is focused on kind of keeping it fresh, like figuring out, we know budgets don't necessarily grow, but what's our challenge this year? How are we going to evolve things? And efficiency is a big theme this year, right? So tell us about like how you approach that. What are like 3 questions you ask each other as you're heading into the planning?
Yeah, especially the budget conversation. We're seeing, I think Exhibitor Advisory Council just released some numbers that it was 40% increase in food and beverage since 2020. Like 40%. We're seeing shows that are year over year, regardless, is an 8% increase in cost. So it's, how are we able to sustain this? How are we able to get executive buy-in so that we're ultimately able to do all the great things that we're doing? And how are we able to test, new ideas outside of our traditional B2B? What's the current landscape as far as cost? What are we doing to show the value? How are we seeing maybe a 2% year over year difference in previous event versus next year? Because again, you're not going to, once you get a fine-tuned approach to the strategy, you don't have to have everything new. It's tweaking some things, and one of the things that we did actually through the thought leadership, and it's simple, but when you look back, it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of this sooner? So we're doing, like I said, a series of CIO executive boardroom discussions where we can really use that as an opportunity to have conversations with these pockets of communities, really dig deep and use it as a way for us to have that conversation and then fine tune what we're doing from our business perspective. But one of the things that we did, what I tasked my team with was, okay, we're doing a boardroom. People, for the most part, walk away from these with meeting recaps saying, here are the notes. Great. Well, okay, how do we make this Instagrammable? That's what I said. And so what we did was leverage a visual note taker. Kingman Inc. is who we partnered with. They came in, they have a whiteboard, pretty simple. Instead of taking the notes, they drew the conversation as they happen in real time. The success, KPI for that for me, Rachel, was I want them to walk away with wanting to take a picture. So we had the team on site send me pictures. People are lining up to either snag a photo of it or to have a photo of themselves taken with it. So that was that moment where it was, okay, this is working. That's where we're keeping it fresh. We're doing things that are innovative.
You mentioned budgets, and I feel like we should jump down to that real quick.
Yeah.
Are you all relying on partners to help you navigate all the conversations around tariffs and even inflation, conversations, like whatever economic challenge du jour is going on? Who are you leaning on to navigate all this? And what is your biggest budget challenge heading throughout this year and into next?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's an issue, not necessarily a conversation around tariffs. If we remember back to the 2020 days, it was COVID. And it's the conversation, be it tariffs, be it COVID, was how are we agile and adaptable? And how do we develop a strategy that we can poke holes in? And so we're going to have rising costs. We're going to have inflation. Like I said, there's a 40% increase in F&B. There's drayage. The list goes on. And so how do we as event marketers weather that storm and ensure the budget that we're putting forth is flexible. We're going to see, and have times where we have to face budget cuts. And so that's where it's, elevating the conversation to say, I might not be able to do all of this. In the off chance that I'm not, what are the things that are mission critical versus the things that are, low hanging fruit that we can cut so that we can ensure the program continues. And so it comes down to just asking those questions from show organizers. What is the actual cost? Being able to have that conversation in relationship with operations, with your procurement, so that ultimately you have an ally there if the conversation comes up as far as, hey, budget cuts are coming, or we need you to cut costs by X%, or hey, you're doing a great job with everything. We're going to see an increase in budget. But again, that doesn't happen as much. So it's having that conversation when you head into your planning cycle, or being able to sell up to executives and say, this is what we were able to do with our budget for the last 3 years. We saw X increase in opportunity where we need to have more budget. So it's knowing when to pull, it's knowing when to push.
Yeah. Budget challenges are like a state of being, right?
And but budget conversations are, it's like, well, it's a business as usual. We're going to face them. It's just when and how are we adaptable and agile.
Want to jump back into real quick tactics. And at our show last year, you talked about the importance of repeat booth visits. What's working for you and your team as far as making meaningful conversions and connections this year?
Yeah, so we started this last year, but it was a roadshow series that we were able to, again, the strategy, there's multiple prongs to the strategy, be it proprietary industry or roadshows. But for this example, your question, it's more of that roadshow. And so how do we continue that conversation, right? So good case in point, we're doing a series of boardroom discussions and then continuing on with proprietary. So how do we continue those conversations that we've started, continue the customer journey, have that multi-touch attribution where it's not just one and done with your company. It's, here is that continued conversation, so that we are continuing it, and we're making sure that as you're engaging with us, so are the opportunities for you to repeat, retention or acquisition. But for this, it's more, how can we have these super targeted conversations with these customers that we started at event 1, continued on to event 2, and then by them attending event 2, we're moving the needle. We finally kind of cracked the code. They saw the value. They're now then, having that next conversation with sales, or they're, signing the order form.
I have a couple of rapid fire questions before you wrap up,
Sure.
if I can, if you'll indulge me. A trend or tool you're ready to retire.
Swag. So I call it Mandy Glenwright. She said it, this is not my terminology, but the swag hounds. The swag hounds that come around and just, provide no value to event marketers. They just get the various swag that you have. So that trend of just having, giveaways that are cheap. And again, could work for various companies, but being intentional with the giveaways that we're giving, not just, throwing away money. How can we have higher end giveaways that lead to further discussions and ultimately get rid of the swag hounds?
A trend or tool you're ready to adopt tomorrow.
So I would say intentional design. How are we designing an experience that, and again, it doesn't have to be so intuitive, but if you're showing up at a trade show, if you're showing up at a, boardroom, how are we intentionally designing the content or the theme to fit and create that overall experience for the attendee?
Excellent. A lot to think about here. There's always a lot to think about, I think, in our world, right? But I appreciate your time, John, especially beaming in from the road. Jon Wolff, Senior Global Events Manager at Lenovo. We appreciate your time.
Thanks again, Rachel.